So I welcome you here today. We're going to discuss Britain's relationship with China, how that can move forward for everyone's benefit. My name's Elizabeth Jones. I shall be chairing today's forum. And I would like to welcome you to the first speaker, Alexander Lightman, known as Alex. He's a world-famous inventor, a futurist, an artist, a government advisor, and one of the main contributors to the book, Brett King's Augmented, Life in the Smart Lane, which has been placed on the bookshelf of the chairman of China, Xi Jinping's office, to help Xi Jinping understand artificial intelligence. So may we have a round of applause, please, for Mr. Lightman. Thank you very much.
Ni hao. So it's very exciting and a great honor for me to be here to introduce this. I hope that this book will be very successful and will be widely read, because I think that Xi Jinping is the most important leader in the world today. Not only because China, whose official population has been listed for many years at 1.35 billion, actually has another 400 billion people who aren't counted, but because of his level head. I was reading his bio, Xi Jinping's bio, on the way here, and it's astonishing to me, if you look at all of the positions he's had in the number of days, his experience and if you add up all the years, it comes to about 50 years or so of experience in various government positions. And I compare that to all of the number of days in government office of the other main world leader, Donald Trump. I don't know if Donald Trump has had one day of experience in office. And I think this is important to avoid what the title of a book I read a long time ago is called Entrapment in Escalating Conflict. There are many times when nations will have ships run into each other, or a submarine run into it, or somebody will try to make trouble. At any given moment, there are 10,000 people or more in the world trying to make trouble and to make money or power from the trouble. And so how you respond to that. And it's very exciting to me that on the other side of Donald Trump's volatility, there is a leader with so much patience, so much information that comes from original sources of wisdom from Chinese tradition and other tradition. Part of the reason that I'm here today is because during Xi Jinping's State of the Union speech, there was a time while he's presenting to more than 1 billion Chinese and to many other people, including myself, who are watching it, but where the camera is focused on the bookcase. And so all the books are older books except for two. There's the Master Algorithm, and then the one that I'm the co-author of, called Augmented, Life in the Smart Lane. And the people around the office of Xi Jinping told a friend of mine, who's friends with that office, that part of the reason was not just artificial intelligence, which was widely reported in the press, but because there's a chapter in the book on smart, green, augmented cities. And I see that that this is a very important thing to learn about, because in China, more than in any other place, the government is making a new and better and richer home for people. So more than 500 million people are being moved from the country into the city in China. And they're being moved of lives where they have mud road and maybe perhaps not all running water, not all the services, to some of the finest cities that have ever been designed in the history of the world. I think that China's urbanization program is an incredible example to the rest of the world, and I wish that other leaders would follow China's example. I also really appreciate what China is trying to be the leader in. China is working, and is probably, if it hasn't already succeeded, it will succeed in being the green superpower, the renewable energy superpower, the clean power superpower. And I have been giving talks for a while on how to get rid of fossil fuels by 2030. I would love it if China would be successful in this goal and set the standard for the rest of the world. So again, I commend the authors and really appreciate that you have written this book to make the thoughts of Xi Jinping more available to the world. I think that the more that the world knows about it, the better. The last thing I would say is that I think it's time for us to finally put to bed something that's been said for a while, which is that whoever is president of the United States is leader of the free world. I have been to China many times, and in many ways, and this is a terrible example, but it's just an example. I was in Dalian, which is one of the cities that had the pioneers of software in China, And I saw a guy in a restaurant, and he had his shirt open, and he had, didn't have shoes. And I go, wow, how can he dress like that? And he says, well, some things in China that basically are more restricted, but some things are more free. In some ways, people in China are more free. So I personally, having been to China, and also as an American, cannot say that America is completely free and China is completely unfree. And I would like to come up with a new thing. Basically, the leader of the rational world, the leader of the calm, centered, sober world. And in that world, I think that Xi Jinping is the leader. So thank you for your time.
I'm now going to introduce you to our second speaker. He is the former UK Conservative Party chairman. He is the former chairman of the UK Public Works Loan Board, and he's a world-renowned investment banker. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may introduce you to Tony Kaplan. Many thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for the promotion that you've just given me. It's a great honour to have been invited to speak at this important event. Professor, the Professor is well known. From humble beginnings, he's well known and respected on every continent of this big planet. To those that know him, he's a very modest man. He's Professor of International Trade and Business, now works in partnership at Beijing University. But he started life in a small village outside of Shanghai, family descending from farming, mainly rice, for many generations. And if I may say so, our professor studied hard, ended up at Zhang, if I'm pronouncing it right, University, and after 4 years came out with a fantastic degree in management. And now he's not just responsible for publishing these great books, but also managing Beijing University. But the professor, in his own right, is a successful author, a best-selling author with over 1 million copies of his book sold. Quite an achievement. As a regular visitor over many years, as you can tell from my age, as a regular visitor to China, one can only admire the current achievements of the nation. But there are some things that we forget. In 486 BC, China was the first country to build canals. It wasn't here. And they have the largest amount of canals in the world, 1,103 miles long, I've counted. And China's been the source of many innovations and many scientific discoveries, which probably include the 4 greatest of papermaking, the compass, gunpowder, and printing. Today, as we've heard, and I'm afraid I have not written a successful book that's on the shelf, great honour, that the Chinese population is close to 1.4 billion people. It's the second largest country in the world by land area, almost the largest economy. It's a country that is so important in our lives here in the United Kingdom that for all thinking people, this book is a must-read. In 2017, the President Xi cemented his position as the most powerful leader in China since Mao, when his name and political philosophy was written into the Communist Party's constitution by the National Congress. The main themes of the president's leadership have been economic reform, boost market forces, and his famous anti-corruption campaign. China arguably is leading the world today with clean power. It leads the world in the amount of energy produced from solar. It leads the world in wind energy and in electric cars. This is not a claim by China, but a claim made by one of London's oldest and most respected research companies. Something close to my heart, China's research in cancer now matches the best research anywhere in the world. China produces 17% of the most respected published papers on cancer research. 17% and growing. China produces the world's best and first-ranked superconductor. And the CPU of that superconductor was not Intel. It was not designed in the West. It was designed and built in China, near Shanghai. Chinese scientists have been the first to build a quantum satellite network. The world's moving on. Internet changed us, changed everything we do, took away paper into one of these. But artificial intelligence, AI, is what will change us again. Artificial intelligence is going to have the same impact as the cellular phone. The cellular phone was invented before the war. It was the reduction in size of electronics that enabled the cellular phone to go into our pockets and then software. The same thing, artificial intelligence will change the way we live, the way we think, the way we organize our health, visit the doctor. And China is leading in artificial intelligence. China leads in railways. China has the highest speed rail on the planet. 65% of the world's high-speed railways are in China. 22,000 kilometers of it. They have 81% of the world's high-speed tracks. China's the only country in the world to have mastered the commercialization of UHV transmission. That's fast transmission on electric grids. China has become a leader in so many things. In logistics, mobile payments, tunnel boring machines, bridge building, semiconductors, memory chips, fast trains, electric automobiles. I commend this book to all thinking people. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I may now introduce you to our third speaker, Princess Katarina of Yugoslavia. She is a member of the House of Karađorđević, the former ruling family of the former Kingdom of Yugoslavia. Katarina is distantly in line to the succession of the British throne as a descendant of Queen Victoria. She's also the granddaughter of Princess Theodora of Greece and Denmark, and she's a grandniece of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, and consort to Queen Elizabeth II. We welcome Princess Katarina of Yugoslavia. Thank you.
I am Princess Katarina of Yugoslavia, Lady de Silva. I've been asked to say a few words regarding Xi Jinping, and I am not political. I'm not going to talk about politics. I'm not going to talk about so many different things. And also, the first two speakers have said quite a lot, which I will not be saying, but I'm sure I will say one or two little hints. I've been looking at the book very briefly just a few minutes ago now, and trying to think of different things, particularly listening to the first two speakers. It's very interesting to see that Xi Jinping is one of the youngest and the first person to become General Secretary and Chairman of China after the Second World War. He came from a very interesting background. He came from a small village out of Beijing where it was not easy for him. It was mentioned that he lived on, was it the rice fields you mentioned? And he also had a sister. The difficult times he had was when his sister was killed, and later on his mother had to ignore him as if he wasn't there. The reason why I said that is because maybe that is what had driven him to be such a powerful person, to be such a good speaker, to be such a good politician around the world. He's been in many countries like Sri Lanka, America, just name two of them. But also what is interesting is how he's very anti-corruption, which we all agree every country in the world should stand up to anti-corruption. I do a huge amount of humanitarian work. A lot of countries have corruption. And when we raise money for their countries, we always make sure that the money and the products go to the right people, so that 75% of it doesn't go into other people's pockets, because we like to help and support people. In China, everyone believes it is the place where they have etiquette, where they're renowned for certain things like their tea ceremony. But what is interesting, I'm going out to China very shortly to talk about British etiquette, to talk about how we do things here in England. But what people don't realize with the British etiquette and the tea ceremonies, we actually take from China. And we take it from there because they have a special way of doing things. And they love the idea of the way we do etiquette here in England. I'm also very pleased to see that he has done so much for China, particularly in 1989. That year was the year of Tiananmen Square. A lot of people in England have seen a photograph, and that photograph is a very important photograph. There was a student holding a flag and a tank behind it. Most people thought the tank was going to drive over the student, but it stopped. That year, I too made history. I was the first member of the family to go back to the former Yugoslavia. So 1989, of course, will have an important significance with me and China. As it has been mentioned by the last speaker, of how good and how amazing the technology they have in China. I'm afraid to say I do believe in that, because I too do drive an electric car. And I do believe that we will be very much more technology-minded here in England, and that we will be able to improve all of our technology and maybe work together closer with China on etiquette, on technology, and on many different things. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much, and thank you for letting me speak and say a few words.
Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, and I should like to introduce you now to our next speaker, who is Sir Iqbal Sakrani. Sir Iqbal is a prominent community leader in the United Kingdom. He was elected as the founding secretary of the General Muslim Council of Great Britain, which is an umbrella body of the Muslim organisations in the United Kingdom. He is also the chairman of the Board of Trustees of Muslim Aid, which is one of the largest international relief agencies. He's also been the founding father, I'll call him, of the advisory board of the World Islamic Economic Forum based in Malaysia. He sits on numerous boards of community and charitable organisations, both in the UK and overseas, and in 2005 he was knighted by the Queen for services to the community and charities. May I welcome Sir Iqbal Sakrani.
Madam Chairman, Professor Mark, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. When you are the fourth speaker and there are another 5 to 6 speakers to come along after you, I have great sympathy for the last speaker to come in, especially on such an important day when the launch of this quite I think, an important pivotal book that provides us an insight into the leadership of this great personality, President Xi Jinping of China. When initially I had the opportunity to meet Professor and Mark, and they gave me a bit of a briefing in terms of the book, what's in there, and it's something that is going to be launched in the UK. I was, in fact, looking forward to that occasion, because many of us in this country, we have perhaps witnessed over the years the development and the growth of China, not just as an important economic power, but now truly a superpower that is playing its role in a significant way, not just in the relationship between Europe and Asia, but seeing its fantastic growth in Africa in particular, a continent and country where I come from. So one is always quite keen to find out the secret behind this great personality, the government that is behind the growth, and the manner in which it is now playing such an important role in the world affairs. Earlier on, we heard from a number of speakers where China becomes number one in different areas. And of course, not just the top brands that we all are aware of, which are now made in China, but the fantastic progress it has done in terms of producing the world's number one products that come from China. Whether it's the agro side of it, industrial, steel manufacturing, whatever, China is number one. As far as the personality is concerned of President Xi Jinping, it's not his just rising to power since 2012 when he became the president, and now being seen and bestowed upon that great esteem as the third in the Chinese leadership after President Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping, and then now we see him being recognized by the Communist Party. But the manner in which his humble approach to the ordinary people, to the statesmen alike, is something which is, I think, worth understanding and reading about. And this book today, which gives us opportunity to read in English, because I believe the Chinese version has already come out about a year ago or so, will be a must, as my previous speakers have mentioned, for us not just to be aware of the background and the manner in which this leader has governed the country, but the way the Chinese community over the years has progressed. We have heard earlier on that we now see China as number one, which we all perhaps are aware, the largest country, but also having about 1.5 billion people in the country, nearly 20% of the world population. But what's interesting is the median age of the Chinese population, which is just over 37 years. This really shows the huge potential the country has in playing its role in both the economics of the world and, of course, the industrial change that we are seeing taking place. Early on, I was looking at the currency. We hear about yuan and also renminbi as the official currency, and one wonders what is the difference between the two. And it's quite interesting that when you look at the renminbi as the official currency, the yuan is the unit of the currency. And sometimes when we're looking at the exchange rates or so, it gives a bit of a confusion. In a similar way, like pound sterling is our currency in the UK, but in terms of units, we talk about pounds, and that's the way it's been seen. So today, I think we have been listening to the news and reading various papers where yuan is now going to become quite an important currency in terms of relationship with dollar. Over the years, it's been seen as a secondary currency, but I think in times to come now, the mark has already been made that it is going to be the currency. And I think our eyes are open to it and see how that progress is going to take place. If I may just sort of just reflect on how the community worldwide looks at China. Of course, besides being one of the great cuisines, and my favorite cuisine being Chinese, which again we have seen around the world, wherever you go, it's that cuisine that you would feel much more concerned as it healthy, provided you live to the stir fry and not touch the meats and whatever, then it's quite a good, enjoyable cuisine to go for. But the growth in the tourist industry.
The duck is okay.
The duck, yes, I suppose you are right. Duck and a bit of chicken as well, should be too bad. But the rest, I would sort of stay away from it for the moment. But what I found very interesting is the tourist industry. The Chinese, they have been sort of, going outside China. In the beginning of the millennium, there were around 10.5 million Chinese used to visit overseas as tourists. Moving fast forward, now we see 145 million Chinese traveling around the world. So this really shows the importance of how the country is not just progressing itself, but where the people of China are moving out to see what the other side of the world are doing as well. And that really shows the importance in every aspect of the growth of the economy, the tourist industry, where, of course, many of the countries, particularly in the West, would benefit immensely. But suffice to say, I'm indeed delighted to be here and an opportunity to learn a little bit more about China, look forward to reading this great book that has been published recently, and hope and pray that China plays a role as a true superpower that can bring the nations together, have a peaceful coexistence of different countries, respect for different entities, and a greater social cohesion around the world. Many thanks for that.
And we're now going to pass to our next guest, who is Dr. Wafiq Mustafa. He's a London GP. He is the chairman of the British Arab Network, and he was a former Egyptian presidential candidate. Welcome, Dr. Wafiq.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I'm really happy to be here today and meeting Professor and Mark and my friends from China. It's important. I had this book. I've seen it for many months now. Was a professor. We met in my house, and we met in other places. He's a very interesting person, very dedicated. Celebrating the leader, Xi Jinping of China, I think is important, almost equal to Mao Zedong, and probably he might rule China or become president of China for many, many years to come, as he's quite a young man in his early 60s and is very dedicated and is, above all, he is not corrupt. I come from the Middle East originally, from Egypt, and we need to learn something from the story of China, of progress and stability, and it's becoming the powerhouse of the world in some ways. It's very important and major in international development, in industry, agriculture, and culture, and to a great extent in politics too. I feel great respect for China. Talking to my friends and knowing myself, I think it's a big, big story for a very old nation, which acting as a very young nation at the same time, with its great leadership, which we see the book about. China, in my view, is not a country as in traditional sense. It is a continent of 1,500 million people. It's a huge feat to govern a country of that size. I'm really looking forward to see China exposure to the world in a positive sense, in terms of trade, in terms of culture, in terms of languages. I don't know a single word in Chinese in a way myself, and I'm sure that will be come in time. I'm very proud to be speaking here today. The previous speakers have spoken so well about many achievements in China, which no need to repeat it, because we can see it around us everywhere, in cars, in manufacturing, in energy, in continents, in Africa, in Europe, in America. I think China is going to be one of the top, very few in the world power, and I've always liked Chinese people, how dedicated they are, and the most great thing, it's not run by one party state, it is a very functioning country, democracy too. Thank you very much.
And our next speaker is Adrian Schultz, who is KPMG's International UK Senior Partner.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It's a lie. I'm not really the senior partner of KPMG, but I'm here nonetheless. And first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for the invitation. I am actually replacing another partner. But I am here because I do focus on working with clients in the energy sector, and in recent years I have been working a lot with Chinese clients. I'd like to begin by saying there's been some really inspiring and one particular evocative presentation today, so thank you very much. I've learnt a lot from a number of individuals who are certainly, I would consider from listening to be extremely wise and experienced. So thank you to all those speakers so far, and to, I'm sure, the speakers who will be coming after me. KPMG, it's a fairly well-known organisation. We are truly global. KPMG has an office in every major city in the world and in many of the smaller cities and large towns in the world. My personal view is that KPMG absolutely focuses on connecting people and organisations, and together we do amazing things, sometimes in small groups, sometimes in huge groups. We've talked about the many amazing things. I've heard many amazing things that China has done. I'm not going to go on about specifics, maybe just to amplify absolutely world-class infrastructure. The biggest individual country contribution to economic growth. One thing I will add, we haven't yet heard One Belt, One Road. You know, that is the brainchild of Xi Jinping. My perspective is it is the infrastructure project of the century. So at KPMG, we are extremely enthusiastic, that's why I'm here, about the connectivity that China brings to working with other countries. Now, just a few personal perspectives in relation to that. As I said, I work in the energy sector with energy clients. Prior to 4 years ago, I really didn't know much about China at all, except about the food and a few friends outside of work. In recent years, I've worked with China General Nuclear, ignoring what various people may think about nuclear power. That really was a transformation or a move forward into the unknown for China and for China General Nuclear. The enormity of that transaction coming into Hinkley Point, working effectively with the Chinese government, owner of China General Nuclear, the UK government, which is hosting this £18 billion project, and the French government, which owns EDF largely. It was just so complex, and CGN did so well to make that transaction happen. We've heard a lot about clean energy. That's where I spend a lot of my time. Just in the last 12 or 18 months, I've worked with two enormous Chinese companies, state-owned entities. They have these names, people haven't heard of them. China Resources, a Fortune 100 company. SDIC, another major infrastructure conglomerate from China. I've helped both of those organisations to come and partner with European utilities to invest in offshore wind. What they're looking to do is to work with those utilities to then go to China or to go to the Far East and develop those technologies together. Through these activities, personally, I've had so much fun. It's tough, different cultures, different ways of doing things, different experiences. I've been to China many, many times. Great food, great friendships, trusted relationships. Personally, I'd like to just conclude that looking forward, I know there are many challenges out there, growing protectionism here in the UK, Brexit. But I'm open and I'm ambitious and I am very, I really am thinking positively about the future. I know, personally, I look forward to many more amazing things happening through trusted friendships and relationships with Chinese companies. Thank you very much for listening.
Dear guests, I'd like to welcome you to our next speaker, who is Tim Hales, Alderman and Sheriff of the City of London. Welcome, Mr. Hales.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to come and speak to you this afternoon. Firstly, I should explain, I suppose, what Sheriff of the City of London is. Firstly, I get to wear this large piece of gold bling around my neck and come to speak to events like this, which is always a great pleasure and privilege. But I am one of the elected representatives of the City of London, and I suspect I've been invited here this afternoon to talk to you because I have literally just returned hotfoot from China, where I was on a delegation with the Lord Mayor to 5 Chinese cities in 10 days, to give you a few of my impressions from that visit, and to talk a little bit about the relationship between the City of London, the UK, and China. So, firstly, in relation to our visit, I went for the first time to Shenzhen, and I must say I was blown away by what I saw. For a fishing village 25 years ago to a city of some 13 million people is quite a staggering achievement. And that impression, of course, was repeated in city after city after city as I travelled around the country with a business delegation of 25 senior leaders from financial and professional services here in London. I travelled on the bullet train from Shanghai to Beijing rather than go by conventional travel and air. It's the first time I've ever been on a train travelling at 220 miles an hour, but more importantly, I think it's the first time I've ever been on a train where there was not one ripple on my coffee cup as it's set by the side of my seat. Quite phenomenal. And the speed of urbanisation and the pace of change is quite breathtaking. And of course, when you come from this country where we seem to have spent the last 30 years discussing whether or not we can build another runway on our airports, and you hear that China will be building a brand new airport outside of Beijing in a relatively short period of time with 7 runways, perhaps you can see just the sheer scale of the ambition of the Chinese government and its president, who I had the pleasure of meeting when he came on his state visit to London just a few years ago. The other thing I took away from the visit, of course, was we're all fixated with the B word over here in London, Brexit. And the Chinese are most definitely not focused on Brexit. China, like us, has a long history and culture. The office that I hold is actually 1,300 years old. There was a sheriff in 700 AD in the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in this country. And they appreciate those cultural and historic links and perspectives. Their focus is very much on Belton Road, not Brexit. And in the Chinese view, Brexit is, notwithstanding the challenges that we face here in the city, and we're not at all complacent about that. The direction of travel, broadly speaking, is something that we welcome in terms of financial and professional services and continued access to the European markets. We will see how that pans out, but so far, touch wood, heading in the right direction. But for the Chinese, Brexit is one incident in a long period of history of the City of London that has survived disaster, famine, fire, and periods of significant upheaval. And that is very much, I think, contextually how they see the role of the City of London in the global economy and Brexit as an issue. For the Chinese, of course, Belton Road, as the previous speaker mentioned, is key. And this may well be a statement of the obvious, and so I apologise in advance if I'm saying it to an audience that take it as a statement of the obvious, but what is Belton Road fundamentally about? Well, of course, it's about infrastructure, and the press coverage that we see here, of course, is all about ports and roads and so forth, usually in locations which are considered sensitive. But that infrastructure is really about connectivity, and connectivity fundamentally is about trade. And that is a critical issue close to the heart of the City of London and the firms and financial services firms in this unique cluster, which is the premier financial services centre in the world. And trade, of course, creates prosperity. Prosperity generates social cohesion, and social cohesion in any society creates stability. And in a world where we seem to see increasing instability, we in the City of London absolutely have always been committed to free trade. We recognise it as the underpinnings of the success of this city over centuries, and we recognise it as a key leavener and relationship glue binder between cultures and nations, and we are absolutely committed to it. I was asked in Beijing by one party secretary for my views on some of the recent developments around international global trade. I know the T word wasn't used, but let's be very clear about where we stand on this issue. We see free trade and market economies and global relationships between nations, including and preeminently China, as absolutely key to the world's stability, social cohesion and ongoing relationships. Now, Belton Road for the City of London, of course, is also an opportunity, and this is a two-way street. I'm sure the construction companies in the UK would want me to speak to their skill set, but in terms of my hat as a Sheriff of the City of London, of course, our core skills are financial and professional services. And it was very clear to us in all the conversations we had, whether that was in Shenzhen, Shanghai, Beijing, that the Chinese recognize the unique skill set that our financial services and professional services firms have in the City of London, and they are very keen to have a proactive and strong relationship there between their Belton Road agenda and things that we can provide in terms of the support. So that is project management, it's consultancy, it's the rule of law, it's legal services, it's financial engineering and structuring, it's banking. There is a huge opportunity here for the City of London and those firms with Belton Road as it gets under pace, and I see it in a very positive glass half full perspective, which sometimes I think reading the press here we can lose sight of. So from the city's point of view, China is a critical partner in the future. The importance of this office for an alderman who holds it, and I am an alderman, is that it's the prerequisite to the mayoralty. So subject to the electoral process, and in due course I hope to become the Lord Mayor of the City of London, and wearing this hat and potentially that hat, I look forward to a very long partnership and relationship with China as it unfolds under the leadership of President Xi and the Belton Road Initiative. Thank you very much for the invitation to address you this afternoon. It was a pleasure to see you all.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I should like to address you. My name is Elizabeth Jones. I'm on the National Executive Board of the United Kingdom Independence Party, and I should like to address you as to whether China and the United Kingdom speak the same political language, and would it be advantageous if they did. So I say welcome from the world's 6th economic power in the world, that is Great Britain, to the world's second largest economy, China. Having delivered Brexit to Britain, it is now our mission to deliver Britain back to greatness in the global arena. And what a fitting choice of venue. As I stated earlier, Lee Kuan Yew is one of my favourite all-time political leaders, and I think that he has been grossly underestimated as a political leader of the 20th century. Within one generation, he turned Singapore from a third world nation to a first world nation, and indeed Singapore maintains a higher standard of living than the United Kingdom, all thanks to Lee Kuan Yew's legacy. Lee Kuan Yew, British educated, Chinese Singaporean. Britain and China have a very significant history together. Britain made its first foray to China in about the 1620s to start a trade mission. China and the United Kingdom battled together during World War I and World War II. The ever-evolving English language has adopted many Chinese words, such as ketchup, tea, typhoon, brainwashing, which came from the Korean War, and the phrases, long time no see and no can do, all adopted by the English language. Furthermore, Chinese-Anglo relations have produced a slew of great characters such as Naomi Campbell, Gemma Chan, Burke Kwok, the late great Sir David Tang, Katie Tunstall, the musician, Vanessa May, the violinist, and Rory Underwood, the former English rugby union player. So we have much in common, but we also have much that keeps us apart now. China has deliberately invested in a very, very significant transportation program. As mentioned earlier, much was made of the One Belt, One Road initiative, which involves 65 countries covering 6 corridors along roads and maritime in order to recreate the Silk Road and the wealth that was generated from that initial strike. The purpose behind the One Belt, One Road is to ensure social stability within China, to ensure that there is an improved standard of living within China, and also to exercise soft power throughout the region. China has a diplomatic strategy of no confrontation, and at the same time we're developing our strategy of global. So both countries share a significant global vision. Both countries have a rather self-effacing approach to matters. However, there's a fundamental difference between the UK and China, which somewhat holds both countries back. We have Britain with its sentimentality, China with its utilitarianism. China is largely unhindered by regulation, and as a result of which has made vast strides in progress with IVF and stem cell. China has recently cloned monkeys. There would be a hue and cry if that happened in the United Kingdom, because clearly the monkey is quite closely related to us. But China went ahead and did it. China's cloned a puppy. China has undertaken gene editing with humans with a view to curing thalassemia. That is something we simply couldn't do in this country. Furthermore, China has invested hugely in its human capital. There is a well-known Chinese biotech company, BGI, which is currently doing DNA sequencing of 2,000 individuals who have an IQ of over 160. The purpose of that is for the Chinese to develop a genetic blueprint for very high IQ. Chinese AI has also created an algorithm for automated inference of criminality using face images. What this Chinese company has done, it has collated a whole slew of photographs of criminals and non-criminals, put them through an algorithmic system, and in fact the algorithm has given positive results, and according to this company it is possible to predict criminal behaviour and criminality simply from the proportions of the face. Again, that is something the United Kingdom and the West simply couldn't envisage doing. In fact, in China it has created an unofficial law for the normality of non-criminal faces. Apparently, non-criminal faces are more likely to be symmetrical and have less divergence with regard proportion. China has also used stem cells from the umbilical cord to repair ovaries. China has also found the ovarian precursor cells within mice. Those are cells which are not ovarian as such, they don't create ovaries, but they are the building blocks to create ovaries. And the Chinese scientists found these precursor cells, removed them from the mice, grew them in vitro, and then put those eggs back into sterilized mice, and then the mice gave birth. So China is streets ahead of us with regard to IVF matters and stem cell. And why? Because China has a very utilitarian approach to matters. Indeed, the last one-child policy of China, which has now ended, was a massive social engineering program, which I would say has probably resulted in China having a higher IQ than many areas of the world. I realize that's controversial, but again, China doesn't care. China wants the very best human capital it can get its hands on, because China is determined to be a winner. China has no shame about being a nation state and is very proud to be China. Alas, the same cannot be said for the United Kingdom. After Mao's death, the next leader, Deng, shifted Chinese power from economic to population policy. And they were absolutely determined that the Chinese should have access to the best of healthcare. The young Chinese should be protected from any unnecessary diseases. And there has been a very significant pre-implementation embryo program in China, whereby embryos are scanned before implementation and birth. And then there is one fertility clinic in China which performs more pre-implementation diagnosis than the whole of the United Kingdom. Why? Because China wants to win. China wants to be the next global leader. China wants to be number one. And that will involve having the best human capital. That is the difference between China and the United Kingdom. China has no truck with political correctness. China has no truck with sentimentality. China wants to win. So where does that put us? Well, we're somewhat tied because we are still trapped in the old way of thinking that it can be seen by the Chinese as being somewhat sentimental. The Chinese actually have a phrase for our sentimentality and describe people who espouse such sentimental views as baizhu. I don't know if any of you here are aware of that phrase, baizhu. It basically means a naive, Western-educated person who cares about identity politics and the environment and political correctness to satisfy their own feelings of vanity. The baizhu are seen as ignorant and arrogant Westerners who pity the rest of the world and think that they are going to be the global saviors of the world. And frankly, there's much to be said of that Chinese phrase, baizhu. We only have to look at our universities in the United Kingdom with a deeply embarrassing no-platforming policy that many of them inflict upon people. We've even reached such a stage in the United Kingdom that left-wing activists such as Peter Tatchell are now deemed not left-wing enough to speak at universities. Indeed, the grand old dame of feminism, Germaine Greer, is now no-platformed at British universities. This simply would not happen in China. Indeed, 2011, there was the famous Bucel case at the EU, whereby Greenpeace, yes, Greenpeace, litigated against a German stem cell researcher to ban stem cell research. And you know what? Greenpeace won. Well, 1 goal to China, 0 goal to Western Europe. How ridiculous. In fact, the judge, when making the summing up with regard to the Bucel Greenpeace case, described stem cell research as the equivalent to organ removal during the Yugoslavian conflict. Absolutely absurd. I would say that we've reached peak political correctness when our own Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, recently gave her speech about hate crime action plan. She's there, she's determined to do something about hate speech. She made her action plan in public, and lo and behold, some baizhu reported that speech to the police as a hate crime. Well, what can you say? Crazy situation. So we are somewhat shackled by our sentimentality, but drifting away from the EU as we are year by year, month by month, I'm sure that perhaps common sense will eventually prevail. But that's us. We also have to critique China. China can be rather hard-headed and utilitarian in its approach to matters. We've heard much of China's magnificent economic growth. But what is that actually based on? That's largely based on exports, the money it receives from doing deals with Britain, America, Western Europe. Now, I would say that that could actually be imperiled because of lack of goodwill. That could be imperiled because when we're doing business with people or deals with people, we want to be satisfied that the people that we're doing deals with actually adhere to basic standards of decency. And I would say that the issue of traditional Chinese medicine and its treatment of animals is a serious issue within the international community that does need to be addressed. We have many animals now, such as the white rhino, tigers, pangolins, antelopes, seahorses, and manta rays are likely to be endangered species and vanish from our planet once and for all because of traditional Chinese medicine. Furthermore, the use of such animal products in traditional Chinese medicine is unproven. I ask, therefore, that there be a utilitarian approach and a practical approach towards such matters, and that the use of such animal products in this medicine now cease. We also have the unfortunate display of cruelty toward dogs during the Yulin Dog Festival. And indeed, in 2016, 9 million Chinese people signed a petition to the Chinese government asking them to stop this. I, of course, accept that many areas of China are quite poor and that dog meat is considered to be something of a delicacy, of course, and they should be allowed to eat dog meat if that is their desire. However, we ask that the dogs be treated with kindness and dignity. And I think that this is very much China's Achilles heel. We have our Achilles heel with our adherence to political correctness, which is holding us back with regard to scientific research and economic development. And China, too, is held back by its lack of sentimentality with regard to its treatment of animals. Animals are part of the priceless biodiversity of this planet. We don't know when these animals, their combination of proteins, their combination of chromosomes and genes, will be of use to us. So we ask, please, please, reconfigure traditional Chinese medicine and please reconsider the treatment of animals. And we hope that we in the United Kingdom will let the grip of political correctness loosen on our universities and on our scientific research. I'm very grateful to you. Thank you very much for your kind attention. And I'm now going to introduce the final speaker, and that is Abby King of the Conservative think tank.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you very much for the introduction. I have a lot of familiar faces sitting in front of me, but I'll put my glasses for clarity. I was responsible for launching the first book in 2014 with Professor Mark, George Richmond, and I. In 2014, launched the first book called China, China, China at the Dorchester Hotel, where we had over 25 high commissioners and ambassadors to come and witness the occasion. It was a wonderful evening, and at that time we realized the response from the visiting dignitaries that we had, that China was on its own track. And of course, within a very short period of time, we all understood that One Belt, One Road was going to connect the world between London and Beijing. And that, of course, is going to be the biggest development that this world has ever seen. And who did that come from? My favorite leader of the world, President Xi Jinping. A man of vision, has great talent. He has a fantastic team around him. But let me ask you, how many of you have been to China? Hands up. So those of you who have been to China, to Beijing, Shanghai, Guangdong, and so on, you will realize the speed at which China is progressing. And I think Alderman Hales has already said all that I wanted to say about China and his experience in China. And I don't want to bore you all this afternoon because I think we've had some very interesting speakers including Dr. Wafik, who is a very dear friend, and of course the royal family from Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia. Delighted to have you here. And of course, we've had some very interesting and thoughtful comments made. And my job is really, as always, to just make a summary of what has been said, which is not very easy. But I think some very interesting comments have been made by the last speaker, who has mentioned a lot of the improvements and enhancements within the technology world, infrastructure developments, and of course, the future focus of industry in China. And I think those of you who have not been to China, stop going on holidays, just go to China and go and spend a couple of weeks there. I guarantee you that when you come back to London, you will be refreshed and you'll be buzzing like I used to go to America 20 years ago, to California and to Florida. And when I used to come back to London, I was just buzzing with inspiration and innovation. Please go to China and witness these things yourself. There are lots of institutions, British, Chinese institutions. I currently have 20 people from China who are taken care of. They are all investors. They're looking to invest in London and beyond. We have a major event for them tomorrow in the House of Lords from 6:30 to 8:30. And of course, we will do our best to show them what London and Britain can offer them as a sound investment platform. Ladies and gentlemen, all that is left for me to say is that thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Thank you for coming along and listening to some very interesting and thoughtful ideas and comments. And of course, Xi Jinping's book is going to be available later this year. Please tell your friends about it, buy it, and read it, because I know the professor, as always, has got a very clear insight into the thoughts and vision of this great leader. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and please take care of yourselves. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to the chief editor to the Mikhail Gorbachev 80th birthday album and the Queen Elizabeth II 90th birthday album, Rupert Pryor.
By way of preface, I must pay my respects to the panegyric, a raft of speakers who enlightened this timely afternoon on the main principal day of the London Book Fair. A reminder of one nation state's unique and enduring spirit. Thank you. And as rare as the swallow in wisdom. A thought on China's president, reappointed unanimously for a second term, he is increasingly acknowledged as the motherland's principal helmsman. A period of office which may arguably be defined as an achievement for technocratic competence, wherein, drawing on his select chosen advisors to his advantage, his objective of making China more prosperous significantly reflects his efforts unlimited. Long may such uncomparable spirit and great devotion to effort unlimited continue across the gulf of time to the benefit of all. Thank you very much.
Dear guests, I now introduce our final speaker, Professor Huang. He is the Managing Director of New Classic Press UK Limited and has published a number of books in a slew of international languages for the President of China, Xi Jinping, and other high-ranking Chinese officials. I welcome Professor Huang.
女士们、先生们，今天我们欢聚一堂， 隆重举行习近平思想全球论坛之习近平思想与人类命运共同体建设，感谢大家参加这次盛会。
Ladies and gentlemen, today we are holding Xi Jinping Thought Global Forum, Xi Jinping Thought, and building a community with a shared future for mankind here. Thank you so much for coming to attend this great event.
中共18大以来，中国最高领导人习近平多次阐述人类命运共同体思想。在19大会议上，习近平再次呼吁各国人民要同心协力构建人类命运共同体，在全球范围广发关注，引起强烈共鸣。国际媒体纷纷表示赞誉。近5年来，习近平人类命运共同体思想内涵经过不断的深化丰富，影响与日俱增，呈现出4大显著特点，即构想伟大、格局宏大、内涵博大、支撑强大。
Since the 18th National Congress of the CPC, Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China, has elaborated on the thought of building a community with a shared future for mankind on many occasions. During the 90th National Congress of the CPC, Xi Jinping again called on the nations of the world to make concrete efforts to develop a community with a shared future for mankind, which aroused considerable attention and great empathy in the international community, as well as won applause from the media of various countries. In the recent 5 years, Xi's thoughts of building a community with a shared future for mankind has been further deepened and enriched with increasing significance. It is characterized by the great design, the great framework, the great connotation, and the great support.
特点之一，构想伟大。
First, the great design.
系统梳理习近平人类命运共同体思想的演进脉络，可以看到这一思想遵循人类社会发展规律，遵从各国人民心愿，发展本国特色文明为基础前提，以推动人类社会共进步为最终归宿，具有跨越国界、跨越文化、跨越民族、跨越制度的崭新特点，突破了传统的狭义的国家观。
Taking a systematic review of the evolution of Xi's thoughts of building a community with a shared future for mankind, we can see that its fundamental premise is to follow the laws governing the development of human society, comply with the wishes of all people, and develop the unique civilization of each country. With its brand new features of being cross-border, cross-cultural, transitional, and overcoming the institutional differences, it breaks through the traditional and narrowly focused vision of the state itself.
特点之二是格局宏大。
Second, the great framework.
习近平人类命运共同体思想是在国内外形势复杂多变、人类社会面临新挑战、中国发展新的阶段的特定条件下产生和逐步形成的，具有鲜明的时代特征，即立足中国，又放眼世界，格局宏大。
Xi Jinping's thought of building a community with a shared future for mankind was born and gradually formed under the specific condition that both the domestic and international situations were becoming complex and undergoing profound changes. Human society faced new challenges, and China's development was entering a new stage. It has distinctive features of the times. Based in China, while looking far into the world, it is a great framework.
特点之三是内涵博大。人类命运共同体是一个宏大的命题，也是一个系统的命题，它涵盖了历史与现实、和平和发展、民主与世界、继承和创新等诸多深层关系。习近平的人类命运共同体思想从整体实现了上述各种关系的平衡、协调和统筹，达到了内外贯通、他我连通、软硬融通的至高境界。
Third, the great connotation. A community with a shared future for mankind is a great topic, as well as a systematic one. It covers various profound relations between history and reality, peace and development, nation and world, heritage and innovation. Xi's thoughts of developing a community with a shared future for mankind realized that the balance and connotation of the above-mentioned relations as a whole, reaching the state that both the domestic and the international are interlinked. Both the subject and the objects are connected, and the soft and the hard are integrated.
特点知识是支撑强大。
Fourth, the great support.
习近平人类命运共同思想之所以构想伟大、格局宏大、内涵博大，源于其背后的支撑强大。这种支撑既源于中华文明5000年的深厚底蕴，源于中华民族间续并蓄的精神基因，还源于习近平作为领袖人物的核心能力。具体而言，习近平人类命运共同思想的形成和发展，得益于长期领导实践中的形成的自信、笃定的政治意志力、高瞻远瞩的全局掌控力、坚韧无畏的变革倡导力、大起宏图的凝聚感召力。
Why do we say Xi's thought of building a community with a shared future for mankind is characterized by its great design, great framework, and the great connotation? Because it has the great support. This great support is originated from the profound history of Chinese civilization of over 5,000 years, from the spiritual gene of the Chinese nation who are good at absorbing anything and everything, and from the capability of Xi Jinping as the core of the leadership, specifically the formation and development of Xi's thoughts of building a community with a shared future for mankind mainly come from the political will, the ability to control the overall situation with farsightedness, the creativity and fearlessly carry out the reform, and the majestic and appeal from cohesion that Xi has formed during his decades of work as leaders at various levels.
2018年3月17号，在中国第13届全国人大一次会议上，习近平全票当选中华人民共和国主席、中华人民共和国中央委员会主席。在5个多月前的中共19届一中全会上，习近平再次当选中共中央总书记。习近平新时代中国特别主义思想在16大写入党章，在今年的人大会上，这一重要思想被写入宪法，进一步成为国家的指导思想。
As we know, Xi Jinping was elected unanimously as President of the People's Republic of China and Chairman of the Central Military Commission of the PRC at the first session of the 30th National People's Congress on March 17, 2018. And 5 months before that, at the first plenary session of the 90th Central Committee, Xi Jinping was re-elected as General Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China. Xi Jinping's socialism with Chinese characteristics for the new era was written into the party constitution at the 90th National Congress of the CPC. During the People's Congress this year, it was written into the constitution of the PRC, thus has further become the guideline of the country.
大国需要的伟大领袖是客观事实。纵观世界大国，无论在何种政治制度下，要成就伟大的事业、建设伟大的国家、开创伟大的时代，都离不开强大的领袖人物。中国共产党自身的经验也表明，无论革命、建设还是改革，强有力的领导核心、引领时代的领袖人物，都是决定事业的关键。
It is an objective reality that a great country needs a great leader. History shows that every country, whichever political system it may adopt, it needed the strong leadership to complete a great cause, build a great country, and open a new age. Meanwhile, the experience of the CPC also demonstrates that whether it was revolution or construction or reformation, a strong leadership and the leaders who lead the times were the key to the success of the causes.
越是大国崛起的关键历史时期，需要时间节点，越离不开强有力的领导核心，离不开引领时代的领袖人物。
A strong leadership core and the strong leaders who can lead the times are especially indispensable in the critical moments of the rise of a power and the critical historical periods as well.
今天的世界 不仅深深认识到中国的发展在很大程度上影响了全球经济的命运，也日益深刻地体会到世界已经从中国共享经济发展红利走向了高层次的共享思想理念红利。这只睡醒的孙子是真正的世界和平的建设者、全球发展的贡献者、国际秩序的维护者。他长远的目光和对时代需求的精准把握，对世界发展大有裨益。谢谢各位。
The world today has not only come to realize that to a great extent, China's development is influencing the fate of the world economy, but also felt that the world has developed from sharing China's economic development benefits to sharing China's ideological benefits in a higher level. This awakened lion is really the constructor of world peace, the contributor to world development, the vindicator towards order. It is farsightedness and accurate grasp of the demands of the times is beneficial to world development. Thank you.
Dear guests, that now concludes President Xi Jinping's Global Thought Forum for today. We are very, very grateful for you taking the time and trouble to attend today, and we hope that relations between the UK and China will be further strengthened. And may we have a show of thanks for Mark and for Professor Huang. Many thanks.